Some neighbors are strange, but these ones are unforgettable. In this video, you'll hear 10 of the most disturbing true neighbor horror stories ever told. Hauntings, disappearances, faces where they don't belong, and people who should never have lived next door. Each story is told in terrifying detail, chapter by chapter, drawing you deeper into the nightmare. These aren't campfire tales. These are encounters that still leave scars. Where are you from? Leave your place name in comments section. If you enjoy unsettling true horror, make sure to hit like, subscribe for more, and stick around until the end, because some neighbors never really leave. You ever live somewhere long enough that you stop noticing the weird shit? I guess that's how it was for me. I was the overnight maintenance guy for an old apartment complex in a nowhere city. You've seen the type low ceilings, yellow walls, that constant smell of bleach mixed with stale carpet. It was supposed to be a quiet job. Fix the boiler when it acts up. Stop the occasional water leak. Empty trash in the laundry room. That kind of stuff. But then I started noticing something off about 3B. It began with a scratching. Every night around 3 a.m., I'd hear it faint, rapid scratching coming from the ceiling above the main maintenance closet. At first I thought rats. Hell, that would have been easier. But when I looked up the tenant info, I realized the room above the closet wasn't an attic. It was Unit 3B, and the guy who lived there, he'd been there for years. I only saw him one skinny guy, maybe mid-40s, wearing a heavy coat even though it was June, pale as milk. Never spoke a word. Just gave me this blank look as he unlocked his door and vanished inside. Other tenants said he was harmless. Weird, sure, but quiet. One woman on the second floor told me he's just one of those guys who keeps to himself, pays rent on time, never makes noise. That wasn't true though. I started keeping track. Every night, between 2:50 and 3:15 a.m., I'd hear footsteps pacing across the ceiling, non-stop, back and forth, back and forth. Same rhythm, no pauses, no sitting, like he was walking lines across the room. I told myself he had insomnia. Or maybe he worked nights like me. But then I started hearing the pacing during the day, too. Sometimes at noon, sometimes at 6 p.m, it never stopped, and I never once saw the guy leave. One time I tried to knock. It was just after midnight, and I had a reason the water from his unit had overflowed into 3A below. Had to be a busted pipe. I grabbed my toolkit, went up the elevator, and knocked on 3B's door. No answer. I knocked louder. Nothing then. From the other side of the door, I heard the faint sound of scratching. Not footsteps this time. Scratching, like fingernails dragging across drywall. I don't know why, but I pressed my ear against the door. Stupid move, I know, but I needed to hear what was going on. And I swear to you, I heard whispering, too soft to make out words. Just whispering. Dozens of voices. Maybe more. I didn't wait. I filed a work order, left a note, and got the hell back to the boiler room. Later that week, I checked the security cams. Our hallway cameras record a rolling 72 hours. I rewound the footage on 3B. I wanted to see when he left for groceries, work, anything. Nothing. For 3 straight days. No one entered or exited 3B. No food deliveries. No guests. No light under the door. And still, the pacing kept happening. That night, I heard it again, scratch, 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 but this time, it wasn't from above me, it was behind the boiler room wall. I pressed my hand against the concrete, and I swear I felt fingers scratching back from the other side. I didn't sleep the night I felt those fingers. I just sat in the boiler room with the lights on, hands still tingling like it remembered the touch. It wasn't my imagination. I know what brick feels like, and that wasn't it. It was warm. Moving dot, the wall shouldn't even be hollow. I checked the blueprints the next morning, just to make sure I wasn't losing it. That section of wall behind the boiler, solid concrete, 3 feet thick. No crawl space, no vent, nothing, and yet, something inside was scratching. I called in a plumber I trusted, Wheeze, a guy I'd worked with on and off for years. I told him there was something weird about the heating pipe behind the wall. Didn't tell him what I'd heard. He showed up the next night around 11, toolbox in hand, eyes already bleary. I brought him down, kept it casual, pointed to the section of wall behind the boiler. "You hear that?" I asked, hoping maybe he'd laugh. Tell me it was air in the system or some old rats. Something human. He paused, then he leaned closer to the wall. I watched the color drain from his face. "Dios mio," he whispered. Then he took 3 steps back. "You've got voices in there, man," he said. "Like real ones. That's not rats." I asked if he could cut into the wall. "Just a little." He shook his head. "No way. That's not plumbing. That's not anything. I'm not touching that." And he left. That was the last time I saw Louise. I tried to call him the next day to follow up. No answer. Went to his place. Nothing. I even asked around. His sister said he packed up and left town that night. Left his tools behind. Just gone. After that, things got worse. The scratching moved. I started hearing it in the elevator shaft, in the vents. One night, it followed me home. I lived 3 blocks from the building, but when I sat on my couch that night, something was scratching on the inside of my walls. I moved back into the boiler room the next night, at least there. I could see where it was coming from. I tried to file a formal complaint with building management, but they laughed. Said 3B was one of our best tenants, quiet, clean, paid early. They said they hadn't heard a single noise complaint, but that wasn't true. I checked the tenant database again. We keep internal flags in case someone submits a report without filing official paperwork. There were 12 flagged complaints about 3B, every single one marked unfounded, closed. I printed them out. Every report mentioned pacing, tapping, or hearing voices. One even said the tenant in 2B woke up to someone standing over his bed. But when he turned on the light, no one was there. All 12 complaints. And no one had followed up. I went back to 3B the next night. This time, I brought the master key. I know what you're thinking, illegal, stupid, but I needed to know. I needed to see what was behind that door. It was about 2:57 a.m. when I stood outside the unit. I could hear it thudding against the floor like clockwork. I slid the key into the lock, turned it, and pushed the door open. The apartment was empty, not abandoned, not trashed, empty. No furniture, no bed, no appliances, just bare dusty carpet and that smell. Metallic, like dried blood and rust, and standing in the far corner of the room, facing the wall, was him, coat still on, hands pressed flat against the plaster, scratching. He didn't turn around, he didn't stop, he just whispered, something over and over, like a prayer or a warning. Then, without turning round, he said my name. "I've been waiting for you to open the door." I froze. He hadn't moved. His fingers kept raking the wall like he didn't even notice me. But he'd said my name, my actual name. Not hey or man or something vague. He couldn't have known it. I'd never told him. I'd barely seen him. "I didn't knock," I said. Like an idiot, no answer. I stepped inside, holding my flashlight out in front of me like it could protect me. The second I crossed the threshold, the air changed, thick, wet, like walking into a meat locker soaked in mold. I took another step. The door slammed shut behind me. Still, he didn't move. I circled the room, trying to get a better look at him. That coat, it wasn't just heavy, it was rotting, covered in patches of mold and something crusted black. His skin was pale and pitted, like it had been soaked in water too long. His fingernails were worn to nubs from scratching. I said his name, the one listed on the tenant file, Matthew. He turned his head, just his head. Not his shoulders, not the rest of his body. His neck cracked, his eyes were open way too wide. And where his mouth should have been, there was just skin, no lips, no hole. Just a smooth stretch of pale flesh, quivering like something underneath it was trying to get out. I bolted for the door. It was locked. The key wouldn't turn. From behind me, I heard the scratching start, again but faster, like claws against drywall. I spun around. He was gone. The corner was empty. But now, the wall was bleeding. Dark red lines seeped from under the paint, forming long finger-width trails down to the floor. And then the paint began to bubble. I backed up, hitting something behind me. A mirror. I hadn't seen one when I entered, but now. There it was, a tall, cracked mirror, leaning against the far wall. In the reflection, I saw him, standing right behind me. I turned. Nothing there. I turned back to the mirror. His hand was on my shoulder in the reflection. Then I felt it ice cold, pressing down, and I heard it. Like it was inside my skull now. I can't sleep until someone else takes my place. The lights went out. Everything went black. When I woke up, I was in the boiler room, lying on the floor. The flashlight was still in my hand. The maintenance key was gone. I stumbled upstairs, back to 3B. The door was sealed shut with a steel lock I'd never seen before. A laminated notice had been drilled into the wall beside it. "Do not enter. Unit under psychiatric seal. Maintenance orders void." Management, I checked the system. 3B was now listed as vacant. No tenant, no lease, no history, like he'd never existed. Over the next few nights, the scratching stopped. The boiler ran quieter. The hallway felt lighter. But something was wrong with me now. I can't sleep at night. I feel a pull. Like something's waiting. Last night, I caught myself pacing. Back and forth. 12 steps across the room. Then 12 back. And when I stopped, I swear I heard it. Scratching dot from inside my walls. They sealed the door to 3B, but it wasn't enough. He needed someone to take his place, and I think that someone is me. You ever ignore one rule and instantly regret it? Yeah, I did. I was in my second year of college, broke, tired, desperate. The dorms were full, and I couldn't swing a real apartment. So I ended up scrolling this shady online rental board and found a listing room for rent. Private bath. Quiet house. No pets. $400 per month. Female tenants only. I'm a guy. But I messaged anyway. Didn't expect a reply, but she responded the same night. Her name was Marla, and her message was short. The room is available. Come, see it tonight. Be discreet. Her house was at the edge of town, half hidden by overgrown hedges, peeling paint, porch light barely working. It looked like it hadn't been touched in a decade. But inside, it was clean, weirdly clean, like plastic on furniture, smells like disinfectant clean. Marla looked about 60. Tall, wiry, wore an old red housecoat with fuzzy slippers. Her skin looked stretched too tight across her face, like her bones were trying to get out. She barely spoke as she gave me the tour. There wasn't much to see. Small bedroom, private bathroom, shared kitchen, though she said she didn't cook much. The house was dead quiet. No music, no TV, just the soft ticking of an old grandfather clock in the hall. Then she pointed to a wooden door at the end of the hallway, padlocked from the outside. That's the basement, she said. It's off limits. I must have hesitated because she leaned in close and added, You stay upstairs and we won't have any problems. I needed the room, so I nodded, signed the agreement, and paid 2 months in cash. I moved in that night. The first week was okay. Quiet, clean. Marla mostly stayed in her room. I only saw her once every couple of days, but I kept noticing things, like the way the floor above the basement creaked in the middle of the night, or how Marla always walked around the house at exactly 3 a.m., just pacing in circles. She never looked in my direction when she passed the hallway. She'd mutter to herself, low and raspy, Don't feed it. Don't wake it. Don't answer it. One night, I opened my door just a crack to watch her walk by. She stopped mid-step, head turning sharply toward me. Eyes wide. Go back to bed, she hissed. I did. The scratching started in week 2. Faint at first. Just a soft rustle under the floor, like something brushing against the wood beneath my bed. I tried to ignore it, but the noise got louder. Scratches, taps, then knocks, slow, spaced out, from below, always around 3 a.m. I asked Marla about it one morning, trying to sound casual. Do you have, like a raccoon problem in the basement or something? She stared at me, dead serious. There's nothing in the basement, she said, as long as you follow the rules. That night, I locked my door. I didn't want to hear anything, didn't want to know, but at 3:02 a.m., I woke up to 3 sharp knocks beneath the floorboards, directly under my bed. I pressed my ear to the hard wood, and I heard it, a voice, breathy, childlike, Let me out. I'm so hungry. I backed away from the floor, just as I heard something on the other side mimic my exact breathing. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on my bed with the lamp on, heart hammering, trying to convince myself it was a dream. Stress, lack of sleep, old pipes, anything. But the sound of my own breathing coming back at me from beneath the floor, saccly, insynquisant, something my brain could fake. I stayed awake until morning, listening. Nothing else happened. No knocks, no voice, just silence. At breakfast, Marla was already at the kitchen table. She didn't drink coffee, just sat with a glass of water and stared out the window. Her housecoat looked the same, but her face was paler. You were up last night, she said without looking at me. I nearly dropped my mug. What? You opened your door. You listened. You shouldn't have done that. I laughed nervously. I didn't. She finally looked at me. The basement knows your name now. I left the kitchen before she could say anything else. I tried to focus on school that day, but I couldn't concentrate. All I kept thinking about was that door at the end of the hallway. The padlock, the way the floor creaked over it like something was moving underneath. When I got back, Marla was gone. Her car was in the driveway, but the house was silent. No TV, no pacing, just that old clock ticking in the hall. I went to my room and tried to study, but at 3 a.m. sharp, the knocking started again. 3 knocks, slow, heavy. This time, it wasn't under the bed, it was at my door. I sat frozen, staring at the handle. It jiggled once, then stopped. Then a voice whispered from the hallway, "Let me in. I'm so hungry." The same voice I'd heard under the floor. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it at the door. Crack. Nothing. No shadows. "Marla," I whispered. The voice giggled. A high-pitched, childlike sound. Then silence. The next morning, Marla was back in her seat at the table like nothing had happened. She didn't look at me. "You opened your ears to it," she said quietly. "That's enough." "What the hell is in your basement?" I snapped. She flinched like I'd slapped her. "Not my basement. Our basement now. I keep it fed. I keep it asleep. You were supposed to stay upstairs." I didn't know what to say. "You're lying," I said finally. "There's no it. You're messing with me." She stood up. "If you think I'm lying, go ahead. Open the door. Let it out." She walked out of the kitchen and didn't come back. That night, the knocking started at 2:58 a.m., soft at first. Then harder. I pressed my ear to the wall. This time, there wasn't a voice. There was breathing. Deep, slow, inhumanly long inhales. The sound of claws dragging across concrete. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the flashlight, went to the end of the hallway, and stared at the padlocked basement door. The wood around it was dark with moisture, as if something had been pressing against it from the other side. I reached out and touched it. The door pulsed like a heartbeat. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text, unknown number. "It's hungry. It smells you now." Another text, "Open the door and it will be yours instead." I looked at the basement door. For the first time, the padlock was hanging open. I didn't touch it, but the door began to swing open on its own, inch by inch, as something whispered my name from the dark below. The door creaked wider, and cold air spilled out from the basement. It smelled like damp earth, rust, and something sweet and rotting all at once. My flashlight beam shook as I pointed it down the staircase. There weren't steps, not real ones, just a steep, uneven slope of dirt, like the basement had been dug out by hand. The walls were clawed raw, streaked with dark stains. At the bottom, something shifted. "Hungry." The voice whispered again, but this time it didn't sound like a child. It sounded layered like dozens of voices pressed together, all straining to speak through one mouth. I should have run. I should have slammed the door. But instead, I leaned forward, flashlight trembling in my grip. That's when I saw the eyes. Dozens of them. Wet, gleaming, all blinking at once in the dark. Behind me, a hand grabbed my shoulder. I nearly screamed, but it was Marla. Her face was pale, eyes bloodshot, lips trembling. She yanked me back from the stairs with surprising strength and slammed the door shut. "You stupid boy," she hissed. "You can't look at it. You can't listen to it. Now it knows you." I pushed her back. "What the hell is that?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "It's older than this house. Older than this town. I inherited it. I keep it asleep. That's the deal. The deal with who?" She didn't answer. She just pressed the lock shut and backed away from the door like it might explode. "You don't understand," she said, shaking. "It doesn't want me anymore. It wants you." I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw those eyes blinking at me. By the next night, I hadn't eaten, hadn't gone to class. My phone buzzed again around 3 a.m. "Unknown number. Please. Let me out. I'm starving." I threw the phone against the wall. From below the floor, claws dragged against the wood, right beneath my bed. Then a whisper, "You're the one who listened. You're the one who breathed me in. I'm yours now." I ran out into the hall. The padlock was gone. The basement door hung open again. This time, Marla wasn't there to stop me. I told myself I'd slam it shut, hammer boards over it, whatever it took. But as I reached for the knob, the whispering grew louder. A chorus. Hundreds of voices calling my name in unison. I felt my hand trembling as I pushed the door wider. The thing in the dark laughed. I don't remember going down. 1 second, I was standing in the hall. The next, I was at the bottom of the dirt slope. Flashlight beam trembling across a wide cavern that couldn't exist under the house. The walls were lined with bones stacked neatly, almost carefully, like trophies. And in the center, something crawled forward. Not a person, not an animal, just a mass of limbs and faces, all shifting, all whispering, all starving. Its body rippled like it was made of hundreds of people crushed together. Some of the mouths were still moving. The closest face looked like Marla. It whispered, "Your turn." When I woke up, I was back in my room. The door was locked. The basement was sealed with chains thicker than before. But Marla was gone. No sign she'd ever lived there. I checked the rental board the next morning. The ad for the room was back online. Same price. Same description. Just one line added at the bottom. "Basement off limits." I moved out the next day, but someone else will take the room. Someone else will hear the knocking, and sooner or later, someone else will open that door. When I bought the house, I told myself it was a fresh start. Divorce papers signed, custody every other weekend, new job in a new town. It wasn't much, just a two-bedroom with peeling paint and a sad patch of grass out front, but it was mine. And at first, it was quiet. Too quiet, really. Suburbs always are. No city noise, no late-night traffic. Just crickets and the occasional bark of a dog. Peaceful until the day the first mirror showed up. It was leaning against the fence between my yard and my neighbor's, full length. Old, chipped at the edges. Not in bad condition, just odd. Who leaves a mirror outside like that? I waved at the guy across the fence, figuring it was his. He was about my age, maybe late 40s. Tall, tanned, too smooth smile. He waved back but didn't say anything. That night, when I came home from work, the mirror was gone. Didn't think much of it until the next morning, when I opened the blinds in my bedroom. There it was, another mirror. This time, it was propped up on his lawn. angled perfectly so it reflected directly into my window. I tried not to be paranoid. Maybe he was moving furniture. Maybe he didn't realize the angle. I told myself I was just overthinking because of the divorce, the stress, the emptiness of the house. But by the end of the week, there were 4 of them, different sizes, all positioned carefully, each one reflecting into a different window of my living room. Bedroom, kitchen, even the tiny bathroom, everywhere I went. If I glanced outside, I saw myself looking back, and sometimes, I swear, the reflection wasn't quite right. I decided to talk to him. Saturday afternoon, I walked over. He was in his yard, setting up another mirror, this one cracked diagonally across the middle. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "You are running a garage sale or something?" He didn't stop, just kept adjusting the angle, squinting like a photographer lining up a shot. Finally, without looking at me, he said, "They liked the light." I laughed awkwardly. "What?" He turned to me, smile still plastered on his face. "The things inside, they liked the light." I didn't ask what he meant. I just went back inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking the blinds, expecting to see him standing there, staring in. But it wasn't him I saw in the kitchen window. My reflection moved a second too late. I closed the blinds. The next day, the mirrors multiplied. At least a dozen now, scattered across his lawn like some insane art project. All angled toward me. I tried ignoring them. But at night, the moonlight hit the glass, bouncing into my house, filling every corner with pale reflections. That's when I realized the mirrors weren't reflecting me anymore. They were showing someone else, a figure, standing behind me, always just out of reach. And when I spun around, there was nothing there except for the faint sound of glass shifting in the yard outside, like something was moving from mirror to mirror. I didn't open the blinds the next morning. Couldn't. I walked around my house like a prisoner, avoiding every window. I told myself I'd confront him again, tell him to move the mirrors, call the HOA if I had to. But when I stepped outside for work, I froze. There were even more, not just in his yard. Now they were lined up along the street, balanced against trees, propped against stop signs, leaning against mailboxes. All of them angled back toward my house. I got in my car and left without looking back. At the office, I couldn't concentrate. My co-workers kept asking if I was okay. I laughed it off, said I wasn't sleeping well, which was true. But when I got home that night, I found a new mirror. This one wasn't outside. It was inside my house, leaning against the wall in my living room, angled toward the couch. I knew for a fact I hadn't left it there. I dragged it out to the curb and left it with the trash. My neighbor watched the whole time, smiling faintly from his porch. When I turned back, the mirror was gone. That night, I dreamed of glass breaking. Thousands of shards raining down, each one with an eye in it, blinking in unison. When I woke up, I was standing in front of my bedroom window, blinds wide open. The mirrors outside glowed faintly in the moonlight, and in every single one, my reflection wasn't alone. There was a second figure behind me, tall, thin, arms too long, face blurred. But in one of the mirrors, just for a second, the reflection smiled, and it wasn't me. I called the police the next morning, told them my neighbor was harassing me with mirrors, trespassing into my house. They sent a cruiser out. 2 officers knocked on his door. I watched from my window, heart pounding. They talked for a while. One officer walked into the backyard. He came back, shaking his head. Then they left. When I asked what they found, they said, "There's nothing back there. No mirrors. Just a clean lawn." I insisted. I could see them right then. A dozen mirrors, gleaming in the sun. But when I pointed, the officers looked at me like I was crazy. "Sir," one said carefully, "there's nothing there." I shut the blinds, stayed inside, tried not to look, but that night I couldn't help it. I peeked, and what I saw made me sick. Every mirror on his lawn reflected me, but not the me in the present. Each one showed me at different ages. A child, a teenager, me on my wedding day, me older, grey and frail. Hundreds of versions of myself scattered across the glass, and behind each one of those versions was the same figure. Getting closer, I finally snapped. I stormed across the yard, picked up the nearest mirror, and smashed it face down into the grass. The sound was wrong. It didn't shatter like glass. It screamed, a high, keening wail ripped through the night, and the neighbor finally came running, not to stop me, but to laugh. "You shouldn't break them," he hissed, face too wide, too sharp now. "You'll let them all out." I looked back at my house, and in every remaining mirror, I saw my reflection pounding on the inside of the glass, begging to get out. The scream from the broken mirror lingered in my ears long after the glass went dark. My neighbor stood a few feet away, smiling like this was all some big joke. But his smile didn't look human anymore. It stretched too far, skin pulling tight, eyes shining in the glow of the moon. "You broke the first one," he whispered. "Now they'll want more." I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over another mirror. Every pane around me was alive, now faces, shifting, mouths opening in silent screams. Each reflection was me, but not exactly. Some were smiling when I wasn't. Others twitched. Others looked terrified. And then I realized something horrifying. None of the reflections were copying my movements anymore. I bolted back into my house and slammed the door, but it didn't help. The living room was filled with mirrors, too many to count. Some leaned against the walls, some stood upright on the floor, some balanced precariously on furniture. All of them reflected me, all of them wrong. In one, I was grinning ear to ear. In another, my eyes were bleeding. In a third, I was hanging from the ceiling by my neck. I turned away, heart hammering. But when I spun back, the real me was gone. Every reflection was just staring, waiting. The neighbor's voice carried through the walls, deep and resonant, no longer his own. "They've been watching you since you moved in. They only needed the light." The glass was just the door. The mirrors began to shake. One by one, the reflections reached forward, palms pressing against the inside of the glass. The surface rippled like water. I ran for the front door, but when I grabbed the handle, my reflection in the hallway mirror reached out and pulled me back. My hand went straight through the glass, like it was liquid. Cold, sharp pain seared up my arm as fingers that weren't mine gripped me tight. I screamed inside the mirror. Everything was grey, colourless. The air felt thick, heavy, like I was breathing dust, and I wasn't alone. Hundreds of versions of myself stood around me, silent, staring. Some were older, some younger, some deformed, twisted, barely recognizable, but in every single pair of eyes, I saw the same terror I felt. One of them stepped forward, and older me, hair white, skin sagging, mouth trembling. He grabbed my shoulders, eyes frantic. "You don't get out," he whispered. "None of us do." Before I could speak, something moved behind him. The tall figure, the one that had been in every reflection. Its body was too long, too thin, arms bending the wrong way. Its face was a blur, like static on an old TV. But when it reached forward, its fingers pierced the older me like paper. The man collapsed into shards of glass. I turned and ran. But no matter which way I went, there were only more mirrors, each one showing another reality, another me, another way I'd die. The figure followed, slow and patient. I screamed for help, pounded on the glass walls. Through one of them, I saw my house, the real one, empty. Then I saw me standing there in my living room. Except it wasn't me. He looked calm, collected. He adjusted the blinds, turned off the lights, and sat down on my couch like he owned the place. The neighbor walked in, smiling. They shook hands, and I understood. I wasn't the one who got trapped. I was the reflection that finally got pulled inside. Somewhere out there, something wearing my face is living in my house. And every night, I see it staring at me through the glass, smiling while I pound helplessly to get back out. You spend enough nights alone, and you start noticing things no one else does. That's what I tell myself, anyway. Maybe I just have too much time on my hands. After my husband passed, I kept the house. Small two-story on a quiet street, nothing special. Most of the neighbors I knew had moved away. The only ones I couldn't quite figure out were the family across the street. If you can even call them a family. Their house looked normal enough from the outside, same layout as mine. Same red brick and shutters. But I never saw a single light on. Not once. No warm yellow glow from the kitchen, no flickering TV, no shadows shifting against the blinds at first. I thought they'd just moved in and weren't settled yet. But weeks turned into months, and still their windows stayed dark, except I always saw shapes dot at night. When I sat by my upstairs window with a cup of tea, I could make out silhouettes in their living room window, perfectly still. Sometimes two, sometimes three. They didn't move, didn't talk, didn't even shift their weight, just standing there, watching. I tried to tell myself it was furniture, maybe mannequins. But sometimes they switched places. I'd look one night and see one standing near the couch. Then the next evening, it'd be near the door, still. No lights dot. And when I checked during the day, the curtains were drawn tight. One afternoon, I saw the mailman drop off a stack of letters at their box. The next day, they were gone. No one saw them pick it up. The trash bins went out once a week, but I never saw who rolled them to the curb. It was like they only moved when no one was looking. Mentioned it to my neighbor Ellen one morning, as we were both watering up lawns. "You ever notice the folks across the street?" I asked. She frowned. "What folks?" "The family in the brick house." Ellen gave me this odd look. "That house is empty, honey. Been empty since the Harrisons moved out 3 years ago." I didn't push it. But that night, when I looked out my window, the shapes were still there. 3 of them. Things escalated about a month later. I woke up to a strange sound like humming. Low, steady, almost like a generator. I went to my window, and there they were. But this time, they weren't standing inside the house. They were standing in the yard. 3 figures. motionless, faces too dark to make out. No flashlights, no glow from a phone, just standing, looking up at me. I ducked down, heart pounding like I was a child hiding from monsters. When I finally peeked back over the sill, the yard was empty. The next morning, I forced myself to walk over there. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that it had to be squatters or teenagers messing with me. The curtains were closed, like always. The door looked locked, no sign of anyone living there. But in the dirt by the walkway, I saw 3 pairs of bare footprints, pointed directly at my house, that night. The humming came back, but this time it was inside my walls. The humming didn't stop, it started low, almost too faint to notice, like a refrigerator running. But it wasn't coming from the kitchen, it was in the walls. Every room I walked into, the sound was there, buzzing faintly behind the plaster. I pressed my ear to the living room wall. It was clearer there. A vibration, like dozens of voices all humming the same note at once. When I pulled back, the sound followed me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat by the window again. Across the street, the house was dark. No lights, no glow. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw them again. 3 silhouettes, standing in the living room window, perfectly still. I raised my binoculars. Yes, I own a pair, don't laugh. Used to watch birds. But when I looked through the glass, my stomach turned. It wasn't 3 shapes. It was closer to 10, maybe 12, all packed into that one room, standing shoulder to shoulder, facing the window, facing me. I snapped the binoculars down. My breathing felt ragged. The humming inside my house grew louder, like it was mocking me. I shut the curtains, turned on every lamp I had, and sat awake until dawn. By morning the sound was gone. The house across the street looked empty again. I almost convinced myself I was losing it until the mail came. There was an envelope in my box. No return address, just my name in uneven handwriting. I opened it at the kitchen counter with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Stop watching. That's all it said. No signature. No explanation. I felt cold all over. Someone knew I was looking. I tried to tell Ellen again, but she just gave me that worried smile, the kind you give an old woman you don't believe. I even considered calling the police, but what would I say? My neighbors don't turn on lights, and now I hear humming in my walls. They'd send someone to check my meds, not the house across the street. That night, I promised myself I wouldn't look. I kept the curtain shut, turned on the TV, tried to drown out the silence. But around 2 a.m., the humming started again. This time, it rattled the picture frames on the walls. I couldn't help myself. I peeked through the curtain. The house across the street wasn't dark anymore. Every window was glowing faintly. Not with electric light, but with something pale and shifting, like moonlight underwater. And in each window I saw them, figures pressed against the glass. Dozens of them, their faces blurred and wrong, like smudges in a photograph. And when I leaned closer, I realized it wasn't just their house glowing, it was mine. A pale shimmer was bleeding through my own walls, tracing veins of light across the ceiling. Pulsing in rhythm with the humming, I stumbled back, terrified, as the lights flickered and the hum grew so loud I could feel it in my chest. Then, from upstairs, I heard footsteps, slow, heavy, moving toward the staircase. I live alone. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, A fire poker ant crept to the bottom of the stairs. My ears rang with that awful hum. The steps reached the landing. I braced myself, but no one appeared. The noise stopped. The lights went out. When I checked my phone later, there was a new photo in my gallery taken from the top of the stairs. Looking down at me, I stared at the photo on my phone until my vision blurred. It was taken from the top of my stairs, looking straight down at me, my own face pale and terrified in the glow of my lamp. I hadn't taken it. There was no one in the picture, no shadow, no hint of who had been there. I turned off the phone and sat in silence, every hair on my arms standing on end. The humming was gone now, but the silence was worse, heavy, watchful. I forced myself up the stairs, one creaking step at a time. The fire poker clenched so tight in my hand my knuckles ached. Nothing. Bedroom empty. Closet empty. Windows latched. But when I passed the mirror at the end of the hallway, my reflection lagged behind me for a fraction of a second. I didn't look again. The next morning, I went across the street. I don't know what I was planning, banging on the door, calling someone, maybe just proving to myself there was no one there. The house looked as it always did, curtains drawn, driveway empty, but as I walked up the front steps, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. A thin line of pale light spilled from the crack. I pushed. The door swung open without a sound. Inside smelled like coal dust. The living room was empty. No furniture, no curtains, bare floors and walls, streaked faintly with what looked like soot. And yet I heard breathing. Not from one person, from many, layered, overlapping, like an audience holding its breath. I turned slowly. Shapes stood along the walls, dozens of them, not people. Not quite. Tall, thin outlines in the dim glow, like cutouts of human figures made of shadow, where faces should be. There was only blank smoothness. They didn't move, but every single one of them was facing me. I backed toward the door, heart hammering. "I'm sorry," I whispered. The shapes tilted their heads in unison, like they were listening. Then one of them stepped forward. Just one. The air around it rippled like heat. "Stop watching," it said. In a voice that was mine, I bolted. I ran out of the house, across the street, back to my porch, slammed the door, and locked it through the window. I saw the front door of their house swing shut. The curtains fell back into place. Dark again. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I stopped going upstairs, moved a cot into the living room, kept the lights on all the time. But even then, sometimes I wake up to find them off, every bulb, burned out at once. The humming comes and goes. Sometimes it's in the walls, sometimes it's inside my head. And now, when I look out my window at night, I don't see the dark house anymore. I see mine, dozens of silhouettes standing at my windows, perfectly still, watching me. But when I run to check, no one is there, just the glow. I've stopped telling anyone. Ellen doesn't even wave anymore. Maybe she was right all along. Maybe the house is empty. Maybe it's me who's changing. I don't know what's real anymore. All I know is that the lights in my house have started going out on their own, and I'm starting to like the dark. I don't know if there ever was a family across the street, but someone is standing at my window right now, and it looks exactly like me. Owning a home was supposed to mean stability, predictability. You work hard, you buy your place, you get to control what goes on around you. That's what I thought, anyway. I've lived here for 12 years. Quiet neighborhood, quiet neighbors. Nothing special, just rows of similar-looking houses with backyards that bleed into one another. No drama, no problems. Until the morning the fence appeared. I walked out back with my coffee, like I always do, and nearly dropped the mug. A 7-foot wooden fence stretched across the yard, dividing mine from the neighbors. It hadn't been there yesterday, not even so much as a post. And this wasn't some flimsy privacy screen. The boards were thick, freshly cut. The wood still smelled raw, and the damn thing was tall enough to block the sun. I stood there, gaping at it, trying to work out how anyone could have built it overnight without me hearing a single nail, a single hammer. My dog didn't even bark. I went around to the front and knocked on the neighbor's door. No answer. The thing is, I knew the people next door. The middle-aged couple, 2 kids in high school. I'd talked to them just last week about the mower, but when I checked the mailbox, the name on it wasn't Darnell anymore. The letters read, the Havers. I thought maybe they'd moved. Maybe quickly. But the new nameplate looked old, weathered, like it had been there for years. That night, I tried to ignore it. Sat down, watched TV, told myself I was overthinking. But as I passed the kitchen window, I froze. There was a light behind the fence. A faint pale glow seeping through the cracks between the boards, and shadows. Not human shadows, too tall, too long. They stretched across my yard, even though nothing was there. I closed the blinds and didn't look again. The next morning, the fence was closer. I swear it had shifted 2 feet toward my house. I got out the tape measure to be sure. Measured the distance between the fence and my deck for 2 feet exactly. I wrote it down. That night, I checked again. 30. I tried the neighbor's door again. Still no answer. But I thought I saw someone watching from an upstairs window. Not moving, not pulling the curtain aside, just standing perfectly still in the dark. I waved. The figure didn't move. On the 3rd night, the fence was only 27 feet from my deck. I called the county office, tried to file a complaint. The clerk on the other end sounded confused. She said my property line ended right where the fence stood, when I told her it hadn't been there before. She put me on hold. Then the line went dead. By the 4th night, the fence was 24 feet away. I didn't bother calling anyone else. I just sat on the deck with a flashlight, staring at the boards. At 2 a.m., I heard voices. Low, muffled, like people whispering on the other side. Pressed my ear against the wood, and a voice whispered back, not from the other side. From inside the boards. We're almost there. When I checked the distance in the morning. The fence wasn't 24 feet away anymore. It was pressed flush against my back door by the time the sun came up. The fence was flush against my back door. I stared at it from the kitchen window, barely breathing. The boards towered over the deck, blotting out the view of the sky. They weren't just wood anymore. Either something about them looked wrong. Too dark, too smooth, like the grain was moving under the surface. I grabbed my phone and took a photo, then another, just to prove I wasn't losing it. When I checked the gallery, the photos were blank, just a grey blur. I called the police, told the dispatcher someone had built a fence on my property overnight, that it was closing in. She sounded distracted, like she was reading something else while I spoke. "What's your address?" she asked. I told her. Silence then. "Sir, there's no property listed under that address." I hung up, The fence pressed harder against the back door that night. I could feel it in the house. The walls seemed tighter, the ceiling lower. Every creak echoed. I tried to go out the front door, but the street didn't look right. All the other houses were gone, just endless dark space, like a fog had swallowed everything except my yard and that towering fence. I slammed the door shut and locked it at midnight. I heard scratching from the back door, not on the wood inside it. I grabbed my flashlight and crept into the kitchen. The boards of the fence were so close, I could see their texture through the glass. They weren't nailed together anymore. They'd grown together. The seams pulsed like veins. I pressed my palm against the door. It was cold, and then it pulsed back. I ran to the basement, trying to find some tool to pry a window open. When I came back upstairs, every window was covered. Boards, no, not boards, but the same shifting woodhead sealed them shut from the outside. I was boxed in. I sat on the floor, shaking until the whispering started again. This time, it wasn't just one voice. It was a chorus. Closer, closer, closer. The kitchen light flickered. Went out. I turned on the flashlight. The beam hit the fence through the glass only. Now the boards weren't wood at all. They were faces, dozens of faces, stretched thin over the planks. Some screaming silently, some with eyes open and rolling. They were pressed into the wood like fossils in amber, and as I watched, one of the faces opened its mouth. My name came out. I stumbled backward, tripping over the table, the flashlight rolling across the floor. The fence groaned. The boards shifted. A long, pale hand reached through the glass without breaking it, fingers brushing the air inside my kitchen. I bolted upstairs, slammed at the bedroom door, and shoved the dresser against it. But the whispering didn't stop. It was in the walls now. We're almost there. I checked my phone again. My contacts were gone. My call log was blank. The screen background had changed now. It showed a photo of the fence, wrapped around my house completely. No sky left at all. Below the image, one notification blinked. Accept the invitation. As I watched, the wood of my bedroom walls began to ripple, and the grain rearranged itself into a doorway that wasn't there before. The doorway in the wall shouldn't have been there. I knew every inch of this house. Every nail and board I'd patched the drywall myself last spring. But now the wallpaper peeled back in neat strips around a perfect, tall frame of shifting wood. The door pulsed faintly, like it was breathing. I told myself not to go near it, to stay put, to wait it out. But the whispering grew louder, pressing against my skull. Not outside, not even in the walls anywhere inside my head. Come through, it's waiting, closer. The dresser against my door began to slide on its own, inching away from the frame. Something was pushing from the other side, and it was stronger than me. I grabbed the flashlight, but when I flicked it on, the beam didn't cut the darkness anymore. It just fizzled, like the batteries had died instantly. The room went black, except for that impossible doorway, and I stepped through. On the other side wasn't my yard. It wasn't even a space I could describe properly. It was like standing inside the fence, itself a maze of endless wooden corridors, twisting and shifting, the walls breathing in and out with every step. Faces pressed from the inside of the boards, watching, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Their eyes followed me as I stumbled forward. I tried to turn back, but the doorway was gone. The air was thick, suffocating, smelling of wet soil and rot. Something moved ahead of me. A tall figure, impossibly thin, gliding between the walls without touching the ground. Its head was bent low, brushing against the boards overhead. It turned toward me, and I saw its face. Not one face, all of them. Every neighbor I'd ever had. The Darnell's Ellen from down the street. Even the man who sold me the house 12 years ago. Their faces stretched across its skull, all whispering at once. Closer. You're home now. I ran. I don't know how long. My legs burned, my throat raw from breathing the heavy air. But no matter how many turns I took, I was still inside that shifting wooden labyrinth. The walls closed in tighter. The faces pressing so close, I could feel their lips brushing my skin. When I tripped, I hit the ground hard. Splinters dug into my hands. The wood beneath me rippled, soft like flesh. And then hands shot up through it, hundreds of them, grabbing my arms, my legs. Pulling me down, I screamed. The last thing I saw before I sank under was my own face, pressed into the wood beside me, eyes open, mouth moving. I don't know how long it's been since then. I can't feel time anymore. Sometimes I hear voices above me, new ones. People walking by, maybe standing at the fence, maybe staring at it from their windows. The whispers greet them the same way they greeted me. We're almost there, and I realize now what it means. The fence isn't closing in on just my house. It's spreading yard by yard, street by street. Every time someone notices it, every time someone watches too long, it moves closer. I was wrong to think I owned this house. The fence owns me now, and soon it'll own you too. When you're an architect, you notice things most people don't. Misaligned walls, false windows, proportions that don't make sense. It's a curse more than a blessing your brain won't let it go. That's why the house across from mine bothered me. I'd just moved into the neighborhood. An old street lined with early 1900s homes. Wood porches, peeling paint, ornamental details. Beautiful if you like history. Expensive if you like pain. I bought mine as a fixer-upper, my forever project, as my ex-wife called it, before she decided not to stick around for forever. The first night I moved in, I was out front with a beer, staring across at the house across the street. Nice enough, same two-story colonial style. But something about the second floor was wrong. There was a window that didn't match. The top floor had 3 windows across the front, facade above the living room, one above the porch. But when I compared the layout to where the interior rooms would be, the leftmost window didn't belong to anything. It should have opened into a hallway wall. I told myself it was decorative. Fake windows are common in old houses. But the next day, when I walked by, I swore I saw someone standing there. A pale face, watching me through the glass. I made excuses. Reflection, glare, imagination. But I couldn't stop noticing it. Sometimes the curtain was drawn back. Sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes there was a shape behind it. Sometimes there wasn't. I asked my neighbor about the place. Old guy lived 3 doors down. He gave me a funny look. Nobody's lived in that house for 20 years, he said. I laughed. Then who's standing in the upstairs window? He didn't laugh back. Weeks went by. Every night, when I sat on my porch, I'd look at that window. Sometimes there was nothing. Sometimes the curtain twitched, and sometimes the face was there, always pale, always watching. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I crossed the street one afternoon, told myself I was just being nosy. The front steps groaned under my weight. The paint flaked beneath my hand on the railing. The front door was locked, but the side gate was open. The back door wasn't even latched. Inside smelled like rot and mildew, but the house was intact. Dusty, sure, but not abandoned the way you'd expect after 20 years. Wallpaper peeling, old furniture covered in sheets, but solid. I crept upstairs. The hallway stretched in front of me, doors on either side. I counted them 3 bedrooms, 1 bath. I reached a wall where the strange window should have been. Nothing, just blank plaster. No door. No closet. No room. I ran my hand along the wall, measuring with my steps. That space should have been at least 5 by 10 feet. But there was no way in as I stood there. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A new message from an unknown number. Stop looking at the window. I glanced up, and for the first time, the curtain inside that impossible window was fully open. The pale face was pressed against the glass, grinning at me from the inside of a room that didn't exist. When I turned to leave, the hallway wall behind me had changed now. There was a door where none had been before. The door hadn't been there before. I knew the measurements, knew the layout. I had walked this hall minutes earlier, my hand brushing the plaster where the new frame now stood. It was old wood, darker than the other trim, with a tarnished brass knob. No dust on the threshold, like it had been waiting. I reached out, but stopped short. From the other side came the faint sound of breathing, slow, heavy. I pressed my ear against the door. The breathing stopped. Then a whisper, "You found me." I stumbled back, nearly tripping on the warped floorboards. My pulse was pounding. Rationally, I told myself it was squatters. Someone living here, hidden away. A trick of the architecture I hadn't understood. But when I checked the outside of the house, there were no additions. No crawl space. No way for there to be a hidden room. And yet the window existed, and now so did the door. I forced myself to leave. Locked the back door behind me, crossed the street to my own house. Tried to bury myself in work. Drafting blueprints, making notes for the remodel. But I couldn't focus. The window across the street was open again. The face watched me until dark that night. I dreamed I was inside the house again. I was standing at the strange door, my hand on the knob. The whispering was clearer this time, dozens of voices overlapping. "Come in, we've been waiting. The door belongs to you now." When I woke up, my phone was in my hand. On the screen was a new photo in my gallery. It showed me sleeping. The angle was from above, as if taken from the ceiling of my bedroom. I didn't go back to the house the next day, but when evening came, I couldn't stop myself from looking. The window glowed faintly, pale light seeping through the glass like moonlight. I thought I saw the curtain twitch, like a hand moving it aside. I told myself not to, but I crossed the street again. The back door was open. Upstairs, the hall felt narrower than before. The walls seemed closer, like the house was tightening around me. The door was still there, and this time it was ajar. A faint draft spilled through the crack, colder than the rest of the house. The smell of damp earth drifted out. I pushed the door open. Inside was a small room, maybe 10 feet across. Wooden floor, bare walls, and the window, the one that shouldn't exist, looked out over the street below. I should have felt relief. I'd proven it was real. But as I stepped inside, something shifted. The air felt thick, like walking into a storm, and in the corner of the room, standing perfectly still, was the figure I'd seen through the window. Pale, thin, grinning, too wide. It didn't move, didn't breathe, but I knew it was waiting for me. I backed out slowly, heart hammering, and pulled the door shut. But when I turned, the hallway behind me was gone. Only more doors, dozens of them, stretching into darkness, every knob slowly turning on its own. One of the doors creaked open, and I saw my own face peering back at me from the other side. The face on the other side of the door was mine, not a reflection, not a trick of glass me. Pale, hollow-eyed, grinning, I stumbled backward, tripping into the wall. The wood felt soft, pliable, like it was breathing with me. The rows of doors stretched endlessly in both directions. Every knob twisted. Hinges groaned. The whispers filled the air, overlapping until they were almost deafening. Choose one door, yours. I clamped my hands over my ears. But the voices weren't in the room anymore, they were in my head. The door, with my face, creaked wider. My double stood there, tilting its head like it was waiting for me to speak. "I don't belong here," I croaked. Its grin widened. "You built this place." I shook my head. "No, I just moved in." But then I thought about my sketches, my notebooks, the drafts I'd been drawing for months. Floor plans with impossible corridors, windows that opened onto nothing. I'd told myself they were idle experiments. But now the hall around me was those sketches. The lines I'd drawn, the mistakes I'd obsessed over. I had designed this trap without knowing it. I bolted, running blind down the hall. The doors banged open on either side as I passed. I caught glimpses in side rooms filled with faceless figures, pale watchers pressed against windows, entire spaces shifting like liquid. Each time the voice called, "This way. Choose me, this one is yours." But I didn't stop. The floor pitched under me, the wood bending like it was alive. I fell hard, skidding across the boards. When I looked up, I was in the room again, the one with the window that shouldn't exist. The figure was gone, only the window remained. Wide open, pale light spilling through. I approached, half expecting to see the street below, but outside wasn't my neighborhood. It was me, hundreds of me, standing in rows on the pavement, all staring up at the window, all grinning with that same too wide smile. Behind me, the door slammed shut. The whispers stopped. I don't know how long I sat there. Hours, maybe days. The room never changed. No hunger, no thirst, no sense of time. Just that pale glow from the window. Finally, I stood. I walked to the center of the room, spread out my arms, and said, "Fine, if this is mine, then I'll own it." The whispers started again, but different this time. Not taunting, not beckoning, they were obeying. The walls shifted, stretching outward. The window multiplied, growing across the plaster until the entire room was nothing but glass. Through each pane, I saw a different version of the street, a different version of me, and I understood. The room wasn't a prison, it was a blueprint, and I was its architect. The last thing I remember before the light consumed me was the smile spreading across every version of my face, reflected in infinite panes of glass. When I woke, I was back in my own house. Across the street, the window was gone. The house looked normal again, but when I checked my sketches, The lines had changed. Every blueprint I've ever drawn now includes that room. Every house I design will have it. The room is mine now. I know how to build it. And soon, every house will have a window that doesn't belong. Storms don't usually bother me. I've been a delivery driver for years, grocery runs, takeout, parcels. You name it, I've dropped it off in the rain. I know which streets flood, which alleys to avoid, which porches to sprint across before the thunder cracks. But there's this one house I'll never forget. It sits on the edge of town, by the river. Run-down place, all peeling paint and sagging porch. I'd passed it plenty of times on my routes, never thought much about it, until one night last summer, when a thunderstorm rolled in. That was the first time I saw him. I was driving slow, wipers struggling against sheets of rain, when a flash of lightning lit the street. And there he was, standing on the porch, barefoot, soaked through, staring straight up at the sky with his mouth wide open, not moving, not flinching, just standing there, letting the rain drown him. I figured he was drunk, or maybe high. People do weird things in storms. But when the thunder cracked, he didn't even blink. The next week, another storm rolled in. And sure enough, when I passed that house, there he was again. Same porch, same stance, same wide-open mouth. I slowed the van, headlights cutting across his face, pale, hollow-eyed lips stretched unnaturally, like his jaw had been unhinged. I drove faster after that. Curiosity got the better of me, though. I asked around. A couple of locals at the diner said the guy was harmless, just one of those weird teens. Nobody knew his name. They only said the same thing. He only comes out during storms. The rest of the time, the house stayed quiet. Shutters drawn, no lights, like nobody lived there at all. One night, I had a delivery out that way. I tried to switch the route, but my boss wouldn't let me, short-staffed, bad weather. It was pouring when I pulled up. Thunder shook the van. Lightning lit the porch. And there he was, mouth still open, eyes still fixed on the sky. But this time, when my headlights swept across him, his head turned, not fast, just slow enough for me to see it. He looked at me. Directly at me I froze, foot hovering over the gas. The rain hammered so hard I could barely see, but he was smiling now, not wide, just enough to show he knew I was there. The thunder cracked, and in that split second of silence, before the rain filled my ears again, I heard him, a low hum, not from his mouth, but from the storm itself. Like the sky was singing through him, I peeled out of there, tires screeching on the wet road. When I got home, I swore I wouldn't take that route again, wouldn't even drive past the place. But a week later, another storm came, and when lightning lit the streets outside my own house, I saw him standing on my porch, barefoot, soaked, mouth open. The next strike of lightning showed him closer, not outside anymore, but standing just inside my living room window. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every flash of lightning made me check the window again, terrified he'd be there. After the storm passed, the sky cleared like nothing had happened, but I kept every light on in the house. I sat with a baseball bat across my lap until dawn. When I finally checked the porch in daylight, it was empty. No footprints, no puddles, just my doormat and a soggy newspaper. I tried to convince myself I'd hallucinated. Exhaustion, headlights playing tricks, stress from long shifts. But deep down, I knew. He'd been there, 2 days later, another storm rolled in. I was on shift, driving through town when the rain hit. Thunder rattled the van, and I knew without even seeing him that he'd be there. And he was. The man stood on the same porch by the river, mouth still open, face tilted to the sky. But this time, as I drove past, his head snapped toward me in an instant, faster than human, and suddenly the storm followed me. The rain hammered harder. The thunder stayed directly overhead, no matter how far I drove. It was like the storm had left the house behind and chosen me instead. When I got home, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You looked at him. Another message came seconds later. Now he sees you. I dropped the phone. I didn't answer. That night, the storm raged outside. But when I looked out the window, the street was dry. The rain was falling on my house alone. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard him humming in the thunder. I started noticing things. My deliveries always routed me toward his street, no matter how much I tried to avoid it. My GPS glitched, recalculated, dragged me back. One night, I swore I saw the figure of the man standing under a streetlight miles from his porch. Head tilted back, mouth still open, waiting. I called my boss, told him I couldn't take routes near the river anymore. He sighed, said I was being dramatic, and hung up. That night, another storm rolled in, and when lightning struck, he was standing in my backyard, barefoot, soaked, mouth wide open, this time. I didn't just see him, I heard him. A sharp intake of breath, like the storm itself was filling his lungs. And then, in a voice that rattled the glass in my windows, he whispered, closer. I tried to leave town. The next morning, I packed a bag, threw it in the van, and drove straight for the interstate. Blue skies overhead, no sign of rain. I thought maybe I was free then, just as I hit the The first drops splattered the windshield by the time I reached the highway. The storm was back in full force, and in the median, illuminated by headlights, he stood, feet planted in rushing water, head tilted back, mouth open, watching me pass. I drove until I was nearly falling asleep at the wheel, pulled off at a motel on the edge of another county, checked in under a false name. When the storm came that night, I pulled the curtains tight, but I could still hear the humming. And when the lights flickered, I realized the sound wasn't outside anymore, it was in the room with me. The next lightning flash lit up the mirror, and his reflection was standing right behind me. Though I was alone in the room, the mirror showed him standing behind me, pale, drenched, grinning with his jaw stretched wider than it should go. His mouth opened so far it split the reflection of his face down the middle. But when I spun around, the motel room was empty. The light bulb overhead popped. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the glow of lightning flashing outside. Every strike showed him closer. In one flash, he stood in the corner. The next, he was at the foot of the bed. Then, just inches from me, I bolted. I didn't even take my bag. Just tore out of the room, down the wet stairs, and into the parking lot. The rain was falling harder than ever, drenching me instantly. The lot was empty except for my van and him. He stood beside it, one hand on the driver's side door, head tilted back to drink in the sky. I froze. He turned to me. Slowly, and I finally saw his eyes. They weren't eyes at all, just empty sockets filled with storm light, lightning flashing inside them like a sky trapped in his skull. when he opened his mouth. Thunder rolled out. I don't remember getting into the van. I only remember driving dot road after road. Rain blinding me, wipers useless. The storm followed no matter which way I turned. He was always there, somewhere standing on an overpass, on a bridge in the middle of the road. Always barefoot, always open-mouthed, and the humming grew louder. It wasn't just the storm anymore. It was inside me. My chest vibrated with it. My own breath matched it, until I wasn't sure if I was hearing him, or if I was the one making the sound. I tried to call someone, anyone. My phone screen lit up, but every number in my contacts had been replaced. Just one name filled the list, Storm. It kept calling itself, over and over, buzzing in my hand until I threw it out the window. The second it hit the pavement, lightning struck where it landed. I don't know how long I drove. Hours, maybe days. The storm never stopped. My gas tank should have emptied, but the needle stayed full. My body screamed for rest, but I couldn't pull over. Every time I slowed, I saw him walking toward me through the downpour, step by step, as if daring me to stop. And then, eventually, I did, not by choice. The van died in the middle of the road, engine coughing once before going silent. I sat there, gripping the wheel, rain hammering the roof, lightning tearing open the sky and through the windshield. He approached. Up close, I could finally see what he really was. Not a man, a hollow vessel. His skin rippled like water, his chest caved inward like a funnel. The storm wasn't outside, Emmett was inside. Every bolt of lightning, every roar of thunder, every drop of rain pouring through his open mouth into the black void of his body. He stopped just short of the hood, head still tilted back. Then, slowly, he looked down at me and smiled. The last thing I remember is opening my mouth and feeling the storm rush in. It filled me like fire, ripping my lungs apart, rattling my bones until they felt hollow. The humming drowned everything out. When the next flash of lightning came, he was gone, and I was standing barefoot in the rain, head tilted back, mouth open. The storm doesn't follow him anymore. It follows me. I've been a handyman most of my life. Not licensed, not official, just the guy people call when they don't want to pay a real contractor. Friends, neighbors, cousins, co-workers, thatched drywall, fixed outlets, unclogged sinks. Never anything too crazy, but there's one job I wish I'd never agreed to. It started with my buddy, Chris. He bought this old house on the cheap. One of those 100-year-old places with slanted floors and drafty windows. He called me up on a Saturday and asked if I could help him strip the wallpaper in the upstairs bedroom. Said he wanted to repaint before moving in. Sure, I told him. Easy. I didn't know then what was waiting under that wallpaper. We started early, sunlight coming through the warped blinds. The wallpaper was this faded floral pattern, yellowed with age, peeling at the corners. I grabbed a putty knife and started scraping. It came off in long strips, curling like dead skin. At first it was fine. Messy, but fine. But then I noticed something. The wall underneath wasn't plain plaster. It had markings, not graffiti, not paint. It looked almost printed like an image embedded in the wall itself. I leaned closer, scraping more carefully, and that's when I saw it. A face. It wasn't a drawing, not paint, not a photo. It looked real. pressed flat into the plaster, like someone had been embedded in the wall. The eyes closed, the mouth half open. The skin looked discolored, but it wasn't rotted, it was like it had been copied, like someone had pressed their face against wet plaster until it absorbed the image perfectly. "Ah, Chris," I called. He came over, wiping sweat from his forehead. "What's up?" I pointed with the putty knife. He bent close. His face went pale. "The hell is that?" He whispered. We kept peeling, even though every instinct screamed at me to stop. More faces appeared, some small, some large, all different, pressed into the wall like 100 people had leaned into it and been captured. Eyes shut, mouths slack. Some looked peaceful. Others looked like they were screaming. By the time we stripped one full section, the wall was covered in them. Layer upon layer of faces, overlapping, stretching from floor to ceiling. I dropped the knife. "This isn't right. We should call someone. Cops, maybe." Chris shook his head. "It's an old house. Maybe some weird wallpaper design." "No, this isn't design, man." I pressed my fingers against the plaster. It was warm, too warm, and I could swear, for a split second, I felt it. Breathing. That night, I couldn't get it out of my head. Lying in bed, I kept picturing those faces staring from behind the wallpaper. My hands still smelled faintly of plaster dust, but underneath was another smell, sweet, metallic, like blood that had dried long ago. Around midnight, Chris texted me, "You still awake?" I replied, "Yeah." Another text came seconds later. I heard one of them whisper. I didn't answer. I didn't want to know. The next day, I told him not to keep working on that room. Leave it. Seal it up. But when I drove by after work, I saw his upstairs light on. The blinds were open, and behind the glass, pressed against the window, was one of the faces from the wall, eyes open now. When I ran inside to check on Chris, the wallpaper had grown back-end. The face staring out at me was his. I tore up those stairs so fast I nearly fell. Chris's bedroom door was wide open, but when I stepped inside, I froze. The wall I'd stripped clean the day before was covered again, perfectly smooth. The old floral wallpaper back in place, like nothing had ever been peeled. But one detail had changed. The wallpaper bulged in spots, faint outlines pushing against the surface. A cheekbone here, the curve of a forehead there, as if the faces had retreated just beneath the skin of the house. And right in the center, at eye level, a new face had pressed outward. Chris. His eyes were wide, his mouth open in a silent scream. I backed out of the room, my heart pounding. My instinct was to rip the wallpaper off again, free him somehow. But as soon as I touched the wall, the surface felt hot, scalding, like a stove burner. I yanked my hand back, skin red. Behind the wall, I heard something shift. A faint rustle, like dozens of bodies pressing forward, then pulling back, and then, faintly, a whisper, "Stay with us." I stumbled out of the house, gasping for air, and didn't stop running until I was back in my truck. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Chris's face in the wallpaper, trapped, screaming without sound. I thought about calling the cops, but what could I say? My buddy got sucked into his drywall. They'd lock me up before they believed me. Instead, I drank half a bottle of whiskey and sat in the dark, telling myself I wouldn't go back. But the house didn't wait for me to return. It came to me at 3 a.m. I woke to the sound of tearing I flipped on the lamp. My bedroom wall had a long strip of wallpaper curling down from the ceiling. Even though my walls were painted, not papered, beneath the strip. Plaster bulged. A face pushed outward, slow and deliberate. Not Chris this time. Mine. Its eyes snapped open and stared directly at me. I threw a towel over the wall, duct taped it in place, and sat in the hallway until sunrise. By morning, the wall looked normal again. No bulges, no face, but I knew it was there, waiting. I drove back to Chris's house that afternoon. I don't know what I thought I was going to do. Rescue him. Burn the place down. Something, anything. The front door was unlocked. Inside the house felt humid, the air thick and damp like a swamp. The wallpaper in the hall had begun to peel on its own, curling in strips to reveal the faces underneath. Dozens of them now, eyes shut, lips moving silently like they were all whispering to each other. I walked into the bedroom, gagging on the sweet, metallic smell. The wall, there wasn't wallpaper anymore. It was raw skin, stretched tight, pulsating as if veins ran through it. Chris's face was still there in the center, but now his eyes were open, rolling wildly in terror. His lips moved. I pressed my ear close. "Help me," he whispered. I grabbed the putty knife and started scraping furiously, ignoring the way the wall burned under my touch. The wallpaper tore like flesh, curling away in wet strips. Chris's mouth opened wider, like he was screaming silently, and then every other face on the wall snapped its eyes open. They turned toward me in unison and whispered, "Stay with us." I dropped the knife and ran. This time, I didn't look back. That night, when I got home, the wallpaper in my living room had changed and Chris's face was waiting for me there, smiling. When I stepped into my living room that night, I knew I was already too late. The wallpaper wasn't mine. I'd painted my walls years ago, pale grey, but now every surface was covered in that faded floral pattern from Chris's house. Old, yellowed, curling at the corners, and in the middle of the largest wall, Chris's face bulged outward, not screaming anymore, smiling. I stumbled backward, shaking my head. No, 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 no. The air smelled thick, sweet, metallic. The same stench from his bedroom. The smile on Chris's face widened, and behind him, dozens more pressed through the wallpaper. People I didn't recognize. Men, women, children, all smiling. Mouths moving soundlessly like they were chanting. Then I realized I did recognize them. From photos. Old. Property records. Every previous owner of his house. I ripped at the wallpaper with both hands, tearing strips free, desperate to expose the plaster underneath. But behind each strip was another face. Another body pressed flat against the wall, eyes darting, mouths whispering, and the wall was hot fever hot. Every time I tore away a strip, the house seemed to shudder, like it was breathing harder. Chris whispered through the plaster, "Don't fight it. It's better this way." I staggered back, heart hammering, and bolted for the door. The handle wouldn't turn. I tried the window. It was sealed. Not nailed, not locked, just part of the wall now. The glass fused into wallpaper. I punched it with all my strength. My fist broke skin, but not glass. Blood smeared the faded flowers. The wall pulsed. The faces grinned wider. "Stay with us." The floor rippled beneath my feet. Wallpaper bubbled up from the boards, spreading like mold. Crawling up my shoes, I fell, scrambling, tearing it off me as it wrapped around my ankles. The floral pattern stretched and distorted as it tightened, and for a sickening moment, I thought I saw my own features forming in the print. I screamed, grabbed the putty knife, and hacked at the paper binding me. It fell away in shreds, curling like shed skin. I made it to the hallway, chest heaving. The front door loomed ahead, but the wall beside it was already bulging outward. With my face, I froze. It wasn't just a copy of MIT was moving with me. Every twitch, every breath. My eyes widened, its eyes widened. My lips trembled, its lips trembled. Then its mouth moved on its own. You're already inside. The wallpaper all around me shuddered with laughter. Dozens of mouths moving in unison. I don't remember blacking out, but when I woke, I wasn't in my house anymore. I was in Chris's. The room was bare. No furniture, no tools. Just smooth, clean walls. I ran my hands over them cold, unyielding plaster. No faces, no wallpaper, just silence. I stumbled to the window, looked out at the street. I saw my own house across the road, through the window of my living room. The curtains were open, and pressed against the glass was a face. Mine. I thought I'd escaped the house. But the truth is, worse I never left. I'm the face behind the wallpaper now, waiting for someone else to peel it back. Night shifts will ruin you. They wear you thin, grind your nerves down, blur the line between what's real and what's sleep deprivation. I've been a nurse for years, and working overnights has made me a different person. I'm always tired, always irritable, always wired wrong. That's why, when I first heard the sound of digging outside, I figured it was in my head. I live in a quiet suburb, split-level houses with neat lawns. Nothing exciting. No one even stays up past 10, except me. So the first night I got home around 3 a.m. and heard the scrape of shovels, I thought it was a dream bleeding into waking. But then I heard it again the next night, and the night after. Always at 2 a.m. sharp. It wasn't subtle. I'd lie in bed, trying to close my eyes, and from the backyard next door came the steady scrape. Scrape, scrape. Steel biting into dirt. The occasional grunt of effort. At first, I thought my neighbors were burying a pipe or doing some late-night project. But it went on every single night. Hours at a time. I leaned out my window once, peering through the blinds. The yard was pitch dark. No work lights. No lanterns. Just silhouettes in the dirt. 2, maybe 3 figures. Backs bent. Shovels rising and falling. Not a word between them. Just digging. After a week, curiosity got the better of me. I knocked on their door in daylight. The husband answered square jaw, polite smile, khakis. Perfect suburban dad. His wife hovered behind him, polite but distant. I tried to sound casual. Hey, sorry to bother you. Just, you guys doing some work out back at night? His smile didn't falter. No, not at all. Must be someone farther down the street. I nodded, even though I knew it wasn't. Their yard was maybe 20 feet from my bedroom window. The sound was right there. Before I left, the wife said softly, "We don't dig." But she didn't look me in the eye. The digging kept me up every night. I started nodding off at work. Admin chewed me out for nearly mixing up meds. My co-workers laughed it off, haunted by landscapers, one said, but I wasn't laughing. It was getting louder. I couldn't stand it anymore. So one night, I grabbed a flashlight and went out to the back deck. The air was heavy, wet with dew. The sound was sharp and clear. Scrape, scrape. I shone the light across the fence into their yard. The beam caught 3 figures, bent low in a deep pit. They froze, then, in perfect unison, they turned their heads toward me, my breath caught in my throat. Their faces were blank, not masked, not hidden, just featureless. Smooth skin stretched over where eyes and mouths should have been. Their bodies were human, yes, but those faces were wrong. I stumbled backward, dropped the flashlight. By the time I scrambled to pick it up and shone it again, the yard was empty. No pit, no figures, just grass. But the sound of shovels hadn't stopped. The next morning, I staggered outside in daylight to check. The lawn next door was pristine, perfectly mowed, not a speck of dirt out of place, no holes, no sign of digging. That night, the sound came back, louder, closer. I pressed my ear to the wall. My stomach dropped. They weren't in the yard anymore. The digging was coming from under my house. At exactly 2 a.m., the floor beneath my bed vibrated with the thud of shovels hitting dirt, and a muffled voice whispered through the floorboards, "Almost there." The first time I felt the vibration under my bed, I thought it was my imagination. Maybe a truck passing, maybe the old foundations settling. But when I pressed my palm to the floorboards, I could feel the rhythm. Scrape, thud, scrape, thud. And then that voice, muffled but clear as day, whispering through the wood, "Almost there." I shot out of bed and stood in the middle of my room, heart slamming against my ribs. Silence. Then the digging started again, louder this time. I couldn't stay inside. I ran barefoot out into my yard, flashlight trembling in my hand. I aimed the beam at the neighbor's property. It was quiet. No one outside. No pit. But when I crouched in the wet grass and pressed my ear to the soil, I heard it, beneath me, directly beneath me. Shovels. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't even try. I sat in the kitchen with every light on, guzzling coffee, watching the clock dot at 2 a.m. Right on schedule, the sound returned. This time it was everywhere, beneath the floor, beneath the walls, beneath the foundation itself, like a dozen people digging in the dark, just below my feet. And with the digging came the whispers. Almost there, almost closer. By morning, I was shaking. I went straight to the neighbor's house again, pounding on the door until the husband opened it. His polite smile looked thinner this time. "Do you hear it?" I blurted. He blinked. "Hear what?" "The digging, every night. 2 in the morning. Shovels, voices. It's coming from under both our houses." His wife appeared behind him, pale, eyes red-rimmed like she hadn't slept in weeks. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but he cut her off. "You should get more rest," he said firmly. And then he shut the door. That night, I tried something different. I stayed awake in the basement, waiting with a crowbar in hand. The air felt damp, heavy. The clock ticked past 1:59, at 2 o'clock sharp. The foundation shuddered. The concrete floor vibrated with the sound of metal striking dirt. I held my breath, crouched low, and pressed my ear to the ground. The whispers were louder now, right beneath me, almost there. Almost there, almost. I couldn't take it. I slammed the crowbar against the floor, shouting, "Shut up. Shut the hell up." The digging stopped instantly. Silence so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. Then Faintly, a new voice whispered back, "We hear you." The lights in the basement flickered. I stumbled up the stairs 2 at a time, locking the door behind me. But the sound followed dull thuds beneath every room, every wall. They weren't just under the foundation anymore. They were moving. By the 3rd week, the house was unlivable. I'd get home from my shift and find fresh cracks in the drywall, dirt sifting through the vents. At night, the floorboards would bulge upward as if something was pressing against them from below. I tried calling a contractor, a plumber, the city. None of them could find anything wrong. One guy even laughed. "If someone was digging under your house, you'd see the tunnel, buddy." But I did see it that night. I went to the basement again, and this time, one section of the floor was split wide open, a hole perfectly round, descending straight into darkness. The smell of wet earth poured out, along with something else, something sweet and rotten, like corpses buried too long. And from the bottom of the pit, a dozen voices whispered in unison, "We're here." As I shone my flashlight into the pit, the beam caught dozens of pale, eyeless faces staring up at me, shovels still in their hands, digging upward toward the light. The flashlight beam shook in my hand, barely cutting through the blackness of the pit. And then I saw them, dozens of pale, gaunt faces looking up at me from the dark. No eyes, just sunken pits where eyes should have been. Their skin clung tight to skulls, lips stretched too thin, mouths frozen open as they breathed in unison. Each one gripped a shovel, rusted, bent, caked with mud, and they dug. Even while staring at me, they dug. The scrape of metal on dirt echoed through the pit, steady and endless. Scrape, thud, scrape, thud. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the light. My mind screamed to run, to call the police, to do anything but stand there staring. But the moment I turned toward the basement stairs, the whispers rose again, almost there, closer, closer. The foundation vibrated under my feet. The entire house groaned like it was straining to hold itself together. I sprinted upstairs, slammed the basement door shut, and shoved the couch against it. My breath came in ragged gasps, sweat soaking my shirt, but the sound didn't stop. The digging grew louder. The floorboards bulged, and then I heard it knocking. From inside the walls, I didn't leave the house for 2 days. I didn't go to work. I just sat in the living room with the TV blaring to drown out the constant scrape, scrape, scrape coming from beneath. On the 3rd day, the power cut out, no lights, no TV, just silence. For about 30 seconds, I thought maybe it was finally over. Then the whisper came, right at my ear. "We're here." I bolted out the front door, into the street, screaming for help. Neighbors peeked out their curtains, but no one came outside. No one answered me. When I looked back, my house was trembling. The soil around the foundation buckled as though the earth itself was breathing. The ground split open in my yard, and the diggers began to climb out. They crawled on hands and knees, dragging their shovels, pale skin slick with soil. Their empty eye sockets turned toward me, though they had no eyes to see. Dozens of them, maybe more. The whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were chanting, in voices layered and broken, echoing as one. Almost there, almost there. Almost they stopped, and all at once, every single one of them said, "Now." The ground beneath my feet gave way. I fell hard, sliding into the pit, dirt filling my mouth, my nose. I tried to claw my way up, but hands seized my arms, my legs. cold, damp, inhumanly strong. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the earth. They pulled me down into the dark. I don't know how long it's been since then. Time doesn't exist down here. The air is thick, wet, filled with soil and whispers. The diggers never stop. Their shovels rise and fall endlessly, carving tunnels deeper and deeper into the earth. They don't eat. They don't sleep. They just dig, and now I dig too. My hands blistered at first. My lungs burned. But the longer I'm here, the more I change. My nails harden into claws. My voice fades into the chant. My eyes, I don't need them anymore. I see with the earth now. I feel it, and I know where we're going. We're not digging for escape. We're not digging for freedom. We're digging toward the surface. Every house, every street, every town, and when we finally break through, no one will stop us. I thought I was being haunted by what was under my house. The truth is, worse, I've become one of them. And soon, you'll hear us too, every night at 2 a.m., shovels scraping closer. When you're broke in college, you take what you can get. That's how I ended up in a drafty old rental house, 2 miles off campus, sharing with 3 other students. Nothing fancy, creaky floors, a temperamental boiler, peeling paint. But it was cheap, and that was all that mattered. My room was upstairs, next to a kid named Tyler. He was quiet, polite, barely left his room. Always had the blinds drawn. He seemed normal enough until I started noticing he didn't quite look the same every day. At first it was little things. One morning he came downstairs with a haircut, even though I hadn't heard clippers the night before. Another day, his eye color looked darker, then lighter. I figured I just hadn't been paying attention. Stress, classes, lack of sleep. But one night, I caught him in the bathroom mirror. He was standing at the sink, staring at his own reflection. And his reflection wasn't matching him. He smiled. The reflection didn't. I laughed nervously. Weird mirror, huh? He turned his head toward me, and for a second, just a second, Duck had God sworn I was staring at myself. Same nose, same mouth, same scar above the eyebrow from a bike crash when I was 12. I froze. Then he blinked, and his face was normal again. Tyler, late night. He asked casually, like nothing was wrong. The next week, things got worse. One morning I came downstairs and found my other roommate, Sarah, sitting pale and shaking at the kitchen table. "What's wrong?" I asked. She didn't look up. "I saw him, Tyler." She nodded. He was in the hallway, but he had my face. I laughed it off at first, but her eyes were red from crying. And when Tyler came downstairs minutes later, he looked at her with this sly grin, like he knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. I heard footsteps in the hallway around 3 a.m., slow and deliberate. I cracked my door open a sliver. Tyler was standing there, but it wasn't Tyler's face. It was mine, staring back at me, expressionless. I slammed the door and shoved a chair under the knob. Sat up the rest of the night, ears straining for movement. At dawn, I finally crept out. The hallway was empty, but in the bathroom mirror, written in condensation on the glass, were 3 words. Nice face, borrowed. By the time I told Sarah and Mark, our third roommate, both of them looked spooked. Sarah wouldn't even sleep in her room anymore. She dragged a mattress into the living room. Mark swore he saw Tyler outside one night, watching from the yard. But when he opened the door, Tyler's room was locked from the inside. None of us could explain it. The last straw came when I came home from class one afternoon. Sarah was gone. Mark was gone, but Tyler was in the living room, and he was wearing Sarah's face, her eyes, her mouth, her exact features, but his voice. I backed away slowly, hands shaking. "Where are they?" I asked. He just smiled, and in my own voice, he whispered, almost done collecting. That night, I woke to find someone sitting at the edge of my bed, wearing my mother's face. I jolted upright, heart hammering, there in the dark at the edge of my bed. Someone sat perfectly still. The blinds were drawn, but moonlight cut across their body, just enough for me to see the face. It was my mother's, her hair, her eyes, her faint little smile she used to give when she was worried. But my mother lives 3 states away, and the body sitting on my bed was not hers. I reached for the lamp. It clicked on with a weak glow. Tyler sat there, calm as a statue, wearing my mother's face like it was a mask. Only the neck gave it away, his Adam's apple moving as he breathed. "You miss her," he said softly in her voice. I scrambled backward until my spine hit the headboard. "Stop it. Take it off." He tilted his head, curious. Then his features rippled like wax melting and shifted into someone else. Sarah, then Mark, then me, one after another, like flipping pages in a book. "Borrowed," he murmured. "Not stolen. Not yet." I grabbed my phone and hit 911, but the screen froze. No signal, just static lines crawling down the display. Tyler, or whatever he was, smiled wider. "Calls don't work here now." Then he stood. His skin rippled again, faces flickering across it, dozens of them, strangers and familiar alike. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, like it was pressing me into the mattress. "What are you?" I whispered. He leaned close. I could smell damp earth and something sweetly rotten on his breath. "A collection," he said simply. "A library." His eyes darted to the mirror on my closet door. My reflection wasn't mine anymore. It showed Tyler sitting on the bed where I should be, and the reflection of me, my body, wasn't in the mirror at all. He stepped away and walked out of the room. Silent, I stayed frozen for a full minute before moving. My hands were trembling so hard I dropped the phone twice. When I finally opened the door, the hallway looked wrong. Every framed photo on the walls, our goofy selfies, my diploma. Mark's poster now showed Tyler's face in all of them, sometimes smiling, sometimes screaming, sometimes blank. I ran to Sarah's makeshift bed in the living room. Gone. The mattress was there, but she wasn't. I ran to Mark's room, empty, but the mirror above his dresser was cracked, and pressed against the glass from inside was Sarah's face. Her lips moved soundlessly, eyes darting in panic. Then she vanished, the cracked ceiling behind her. I grabbed my bag and keys. I wasn't going to wait for him to take me. I bolted out the front door into the yard. It was dark, colder than it should have been for spring, and there, under the streetlight, Tyler stood. He wasn't wearing anyone's face now. His head was smooth and blank. Like a mannequin, dozens of faces flickered across his body, sliding under his skin like fish under ice. He lifted one pale hand and pointed at me. "You're next," he said in my own voice. I ran for my car. The windows were fogged in the glass. My own reflection stared back at me only. It was smiling, wide and wrong, and in the fog. A message had been written backward from the inside, already borrowed. When I touched my face, the skin shifted under my fingers, and I realized it wasn't entirely mine anymore. I stumbled back from the car, clutching my face. The skin under my fingers felt loose, like it didn't quite fit. Warm, shifting. I ran inside, slamming the door behind me, and bolted up the stairs to the bathroom. The mirror above the sink showed me, but not quite. My left eye was darker than the right, hazel instead of brown. My jawline slimmer, nose narrower. My face flickered, shifting, as if a dozen versions of me were layered on top of each other. I gripped the sink, knuckles white. It's still me. It's still me. Behind me, a voice chuckled. Not for long, I spun. Tyler was in the doorway, blank-faced again, like a mannequin carved smooth. His skin rippled, and for a moment he wore my face, but not the one in the mirror. This version smiled wider, cleaner, perfect. "You're sloppy," he said in my own voice. "You don't deserve to keep it." I grabbed the mirror and smashed it with my fist, shards exploding across the tile. My reflection fractured into dozens of Mez, each smiling differently, each whispering silently. Tyler stepped closer. "You can't break what's already borrowed." I ran, tripping down the stairs, breath ragged. The house felt alive. Now photos on the walls, all shifting, every face in every frame replaced by me. Different versions, different smiles. I tore them down, one after another, but the glass stayed intact. The images crawling like insects beneath the panes. I could hear Sarah screaming faintly, somewhere inside the walls. Mark II, their voices merged, echoing from nowhere and everywhere. "Help us, join us, borrowed." By the time I reached the front door, Tyler was already outside, waiting. He stood under the porch light, blank-faced, head tilted. "You can't run," he said. "I follow the face. Wherever it goes." I bolted past him, sprinting down the street. Houses blurred, streetlights flickered. My lungs burned. I made it 3 blocks before my legs gave out. I fell to the pavement, gasping. When I looked up, I wasn't on campus streets anymore. I was back in my rental house. The same porch, the same peeling paint, the same front door. The door opened on its own. Tyler stood inside, wearing my face dot perfectly. I staggered back. No, that's me. That's mine." He smiled gently, like he was explaining something to a child. "It was never yours. You just kept it warm for me." Behind him, Sarah and Mark stepped out of the shadows. Their faces weren't their own. They were smooth, featureless, like wax melted blank. They reached for me, hands trembling. "We borrowed too long," Sarah whispered, voice hollow. "Now there's nothing left." I ran. I don't even remember where I just ran. Through streets that twisted wrong, through houses that weren't mine. My face blurred in every window I passed. When I finally stopped, panting, I was in front of a mirror in some unfamiliar room. I looked into it and Tyler looked back, not beside me. Not behind me, he was me. Perfect, flawless, and the version in the glass smiled. "See," he said, "fits better on me anyway." I slammed my fists into the mirror until blood streaked the glass. But no matter how many cracks spread, he stayed, calm, smiling. And then, in unison, every reflection around the room mirrors, windows, even the shine-off picture frames shifted. They were all him, wearing me. I don't know how much longer I can hold on to myself. My skin doesn't feel like mine anymore. My voice sounds wrong in my own ears. And the worst part, people don't look at me the same. My friends, my professors, strangers on the street, they smile politely, but their eyes slide past me like I'm nothing. Because I'm not wearing my face anymore, he is. Somebody else will notice him next. Somebody else will see the wrong reflection, or catch him in a borrowed face. And when they do, he'll move on. That's how the cycle works. I'm just the one he left behind, faceless.